Good day. It is Thanksgiving Monday in Canada. That sound, Canada. In an indigenous American language, an American indigenous language, Indios, Canada. That sound means village, town, city. In American indigenous languages from this area, the Great Lakes region of North America and beyond. In the 70s, to my recollection, something my ancestors wanted me to remember, because we were all experiencing language loss, is that Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Nixon for sure, I remember being told, he is Hindu. Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I do not know. I do not know if he's one of those people that change his religious affiliation to suit to get their mission done. I do not know. But what I do know is that Pierre Elliott Trudeau tricked Queen Elizabeth so that Canada does not have any indigenous languages as official, when it should have, just like the country called India in Asia. North America had Indian territory. In India, as they call it by the United Nations, they pronounce all letters very well, except maybe W. They pronounce H. They pronounce J. They pronounce I. They maybe don't pronounce W as well. So, that country Baratistan, that was split into Pakistan and called India, it seems to confuse indigenous Americans and poor Bharatinians, or Gujaratis, Sindhu, Sikh, Gujarati, Tamil, etc., etc., etc. Wealthy, super wealthy, rich Asians, not Far East Asians, were duping us, West Indians and East Indians, throwing us all into a melting pot along with sub-Saharan Africans and calling us black or labeling us black, depending on how dark our complexion was. Is that right? No, it is not. Because in that mix, you have many languages mixing and jiving together, and sound patterns from each of the languages mean something in their ancient language. Yet, the Hollywood, Californication, sexual influencers take the words, our phonetic sound patterns, as they are used in our languages. Sanskrit, split into many languages. Ancient Chinese, split into many languages. Our American languages, like Algic, split into many languages. UT, split into many languages. Mayan, split into many languages. Nahuatl, split into many languages. And they take sound patterns like war, and gay, and race, and black, and white, and they use them on TV detrimentally to everyone's psychology, no matter who they are, worldwide. I am going to switch to CIUT now. The show is about to start. This song hopefully ends before I switch over. So it's like a smooth transition. People go through a transition from baby to little child, to toddler, to tween, to teenage. They go through puberty, they go through youth, they become an adult, they get older than age. Then they pass on.
Wake up! Welcome to the reservation. Because the Bill of Rights does not apply to Indian people living federally recognized Indian reservations.
My Walker, the Nexus,
United States of America does not apply to any Indian
like the Lexus.
living on an Indian reservation. So welcome to the reservation. Welcome to the reservation.
That's Russell Means, and this is Alternative Radio. I'm David Barsomian. This edition of AR features Russell Means. Welcome to the reservation. Indigenous communities are among the poorest in the United States. This is one of the many persistent symptoms of the colonial relationship imposed by force upon indigenous peoples. As famed historian Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz says, neither arcane colonial laws nor the historical trauma of genocide simply disappear with time, and certainly not when conditions of life and consciousness perpetuate them. From the earliest days of colonial settlement, a theme of eliminating Indians in the name of expansion and settler opportunity became embedded into the U.S. political system and culture. The violence unleashed on the largely defenseless Indian nations had few parallels in history. Treaties and policies involving indigenous peoples have consistently been designed to disadvantage them, locking them into suppressed social status and codifying their dependence on the U.S. government.
And the
Our
Canadian.
guest today is Russell Means, a renowned activist for indigenous rights. In Oglala, Lakota, he was born on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. He was a founding member of the American
Being
Indian
genetic diverse,
Movement,
genealogical
and its
diverse.
first national director. He passed away in
I got Sioux
2012.
Indian in my blood. Lakota,
This
Dakota.
never-before broadcast program was recorded at Bowdoin College in Maine in 1992. And now, Russell Means, welcome to the reservation.
Hamitakwapi, Mioma Lakota. Imaginante hama kiazi tiospai kile hesapa ki lilo wakan. Wakan. I said in my language, part of a traditional greeting I am bound to give, because I come from an oral society. I said, hello, my relatives. I am an ally, and I come from our very sacred holy land, the Black Hills, which is in what is called the state of South Dakota now. The white man calls us Sioux Indians. You know, a long time ago, almost half a century, my grandfather told me a story, and I want to relate it to you all. He said, a long time ago, the people were sitting around the campfire. He said, and the men began to watch the women grow with child. And as they continued to watch, they witnessed the miracle of life, the miracle of birth. And then they saw that new life, that new miracle taken by the woman. And they nurtured that new life at their breast. And they watched that baby begin to grow. That was the end of his story to me when I was 5 or 6 years old. My grandfather would take me on walks when I was 6 years old, 5 years old, and tell me many stories about my people, some of which I've forgotten. I remember that one. And I've added this to that story. The men begin to look at one another and poke themselves. So what are we doing here? Well, I've come to find out what my grandfather meant. Because in the universe, there's a female-male balance. And throughout all of life on this sacred grandmother, the Mother Earth, there's a female-male balance. In all of life, except among us, the two-leggeds, human beings. And so we here in the Western Hemisphere, now there are exceptions to the rules. And for you anthros and archies that may be here, I acknowledge those exceptions. But the rule, and each exception, by the way, only goes to prove the rule. The rule was that we built our societies to reflect the female-male balance in the universe and on this sacred earth. So we had matrilineal societies based upon the clan system. It's in our songs and in our humor. The female lives longer than the male. It's a natural fact. So when we marry, we go to live where the female is from. Because when we die, we want our wife and children to be around her friends and relatives. The clan system is the answer to world peace. Of course, the anthros haven't gotten that far yet. And the archaeologists, a broken piece of pottery hasn't told them that yet. Or any of our bones that they use for ashtrays and displays and for storage bins to fill up storage bins. That class known as grave robbers to us, but science to you all, the science of archaeology. Grave robbers, pure and simple. I have no feelings whatsoever for either one of those alleged sciences, or for the hissies, the historians, the archies, anthros, and hissies, or any theologists, because those are the professions that continue the genocide are principally responsible for the continuing genocide against my people. You see, we've been an expendable people since 1492, and 500 years later we still are. I talk and lecture all over this country, and I build coalitions all over this country with other peoples of the sacred colors. And usually I run into Americans that say, well, it's my fault. That happened 100 years ago. Well, I bet come down to where I live. And you will see the Navajos being forcibly relocated, traditional Indian Navajos, who are a burden to no taxpayer and are self-sufficient, being forcibly relocated by the United States of America because they happen to be self-sufficient on a bed of coal. It's happening right now, tonight. I go to the James Bay Cree up in Canada.
Got to my blood
Or the Inupiat and the Yupik are commonly referred to as Eskimos of Alaska.
Got to my blood too.
Go to the Hawaiians or the American Samoans or the Indian Micronesians. Go to Mexico,
Got to my blood too, Mexico.
Peru,
Peru's my
Guatemala,
blood too.
Nicaragua,
Nicaragua
go anywhere
too.
in the Western Hemisphere.
It's all my blood, all the West.
My people are expendable.
I'm not
We can't
expendable.
even get a collective yawn from America. We went in 1969, the American Indian people, even though our average lifespan is 44.5 years in this country, lower than the Indian people of Guatemala, the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. Irrespective of that fact and all the other factors of poverty, the deprivation that brings upon human beings, we were the fastest growing ethnic group in America in 1969. After the initiation in 1972 of that sterilization program, 4 years later, we were at less than zero population growth.
1972 to 1976.
So you see, after 500 years of discovering
That's
that
when
clown
Trudeau and Nixon
washed
were
up
in
on a
power,
beach in the
eh?
Caribbean, saving him from his mutinous crew.
Trudeau and Nixon.
We have
Pierre
nothing to
Elliott
celebrate.
Trudeau and Nixon.
I'm talking about
The coup against
Christopher
America.
Columbus,
The time shift.
are better known to you
Jumped
all
in
as
time.
Christopher.
Some would say it went from the 1800s to the 1900s in that 60s there.
Reservations has been turned into a racist term in America. People assume that the United States of America and its benevolence gave us these reservations. Well, America has conveniently hid from your history the expansionism of the West. All you hear about the imperialist march of America is the expansionism of the west of the Mississippi. Over 80 different Indian nations east of the Mississippi were wiped off the face of the earth. Indian nations that were common right on the very ground you're sitting on right now. The legacy of America.
That's the legacy of white
The
grandkids.
legacy and the heritage of my people. My son's people. My granddaughter's people.
The legacy of United States white Yankees. Murder of my people.
The word reservation comes from the word reserve. We reserve that land to ourselves. All of those people who did not reserve land are now extinct. That's why there are very, this many reservations east of the Mississippi. Because if they weren't exterminated off the face of the earth, they were forced to march west. Ask the Shawnee.
In my blood too.
So reservations, we reserve that land. In almost every instance by treaty, guaranteed by Article 6 in the United States Constitution, that says treaties are the law of the land, equal to the Constitution. 371 treaties. 371 treaties. So we told the United States, our leaders did, our spokespeople in the last century, we tried to tell the American people, listen, if your government doesn't live up to the treaties, you're going to suffer. The Six Nations people of the United States and Canada, they attempted to tell the League of Nations back in 1926 when they sent an emissary over to Geneva. And he attempted to tell the League of Nations that if the United States cannot live up to its international agreements that it made with Indian nations, then what can the rest of the world expect? Nobody listened. Again in the 1950s, again in the 1960s, again in the 1970s, again in the 1980s, we continually tell you all, it's going to come back on you. Watch out, be responsible. Be responsible for the government of the United States of America. So what has happened? Now you're living on the biggest reservation in the world. It's called the United States of America.
Yeah.
If anybody that hangs around Washington, D.C. eventually has a brain full of mush. All you have to do is watch TV, right? Watch what passes for rhetoric that comes out of their mouth, that garbage, and people still get in line and vote. Isn't there a parable from the European legacy about the lemmings who were led by, what's that guy's name, the Pied Piper, to the wharf? Isn't that supposed to teach you something, that kind of a story? You want to know about health insurance? Well, come on down. Come on down to my reservation. The Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, where Wounded Knee is. We are the poorest county in America. Our health conditions are worse than any other health conditions anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. This is all statistical facts. Come on down, see the health care we have. Come on into Indian country. Find out about health care. My mother's dead because of that health care. I'm deaf in this ear because of that health care.
Too much
You want some
opium.
other horror stories? Because I've protested about the torture and murder of babies in the hospitals on Indian reservations. Well, it marches. And you're talking about national health care. Look at your education, which 10 years ago, let's go back even further. When I was in public school in the 1950s, the United States of America was ranked number 1 in the country, in the world, as far as education of its youth is concerned. Today, it's 19th. And just in the last 8 years, it slipped 2 places. When I started all this stuff and studying it back in '84, the United States was ranked 17th. And in 8 years, went 2 more places. There are countries that educate their young better than this country does. And those countries you don't even know. You've never heard of. And it's government education. It's called public school, but it's a government school, okay? Go to the reservation, you'll see the same result. Look at the inner city statistics on education. They have finally, since the 60s, they were 1/3 lower than our dropout rate. Now the inner city dropout rate is equal to the Indian dropout rate on the national scale. It's at 40%. Come on down to the reservation. I can never understand how the educational system devised in the 10th century has any validity for today. The system that you're sitting in right now was devised in the 10th century by the Holy Roman Catholic Church. And you think it has relevance to today? Health and education. Living proof that you're living in a reservation. Everything you hear on TV. You know? You're not old enough. Some of you are. I'm certainly old enough to remember when the values of this country were such that newspaper companies had newspaper stands on virtually every corner in the cities of America, at every bus stop. And those newspapers were sitting there free, just staying there. But they trusted you to put a dime in. It cost a dime. Put a dime in and take just one paper. Today, it's a miniature vault to get a newspaper. What are those values, man? How many locks do you have? You're fortunate in Maine because you're not that close to the citadels of depravity like New York City at all. I'm talking about the values of America, man. Go to our Indian reservation. You'll see the same thing. Theft. Lack of values. I remember when you didn't have to lock your bicycle in America. Now you go in a hardware shop and those locks that are needed for bicycles. Oh, mackerel. Tempered steel, the whole thing, man. Welcome to the reservation. And I'll give you a clue. In your own history, every immigrant group that came here, save one, were family-based. Every one of those immigrant groups became economically viable once they got to this country. The latest example are the Asians. They come from a family-based culture. Then after a generation or two, they become Americans. When the children are champing at the bit, man, but to turn 18 so they can leave home. That's sad, man. Your child wants to leave home? The immigrant group who were forced here as slaves, and so they are still struggling to become economically viable in America, in the United States. That's the African bit. My people, by your government's policy that is supposed to live up to the Constitution of the United States that you all got from us. And no thank yous. They've destroyed our family, so we're dependent on the government. Literally and figuratively. But welcome to the reservation. Because America, that's all you hear. Are the historians telling you this? The anthros? The archaeologists? The grave robbers? Huh? Have you learned these things? How free are you? Are you economically free? To have a family? No. When I was growing up, my father, who was a welder, could afford to raise my brothers and I, 4 of us, my wife and his wife, my mother stayed at home.
That changed in the 70s for a lot.
Weekly paycheck.
That changed in the late 70s to early 80s for a lot.
Had one car. We weren't rich. We weren't middle class. But he could afford to have his family. Today, it is mandatory that both parents work just to survive in this economy. That is not freedom. When your economic freedom is taken away, everything else is taken away, and you become dependent on government. Welcome to the reservation.
The whole world's a reservation
Free
now
enterprise.
because of USA.
What's free enterprise?
The whole world's residential school because of USA now.
One oil company goes down one year, swallowed up by another oil company. Another corporation swallowed up by another corporation. the antitrust laws passed in 1912, 1914 is a joke. Your Constitution is a joke. Your Bill of Rights are a joke. In December, when the USA had a special issue celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights, on the front page, and I forget the guy's name from the White House, close aide to Bush, told the reporter, told the USA Today, that the Bill of Rights is a good guide. It's a good guide. What? I took that newspaper around. I was at this center, all white people. I went around. I said, look at this, man. They said the Bill of Rights is a good guide. Went up to person after person, trying to get some kind of interest in their rights, man. And they're too busy. The President of the United States, where the buck stops here, right, has in his employ everyone who says the Bill of Rights is a good guide. Come on, man. Wake up. Welcome to the reservation. Because the Bill of Rights does not apply to Indian people living on a federally recognized Indian reservation, nor a state reservation. The Constitution of the United States of America does not apply to any Indian living on an Indian reservation. That is fact. So welcome to the reservation. You have no rights. And nobody's marching, man. Nobody's indignant. I had the national president of the Future Farmers of America in my home, Chinle, Arizona, a couple of years ago, along with the local chapter president, high school student. She was a senior. He was in the first year of college. And they were so eager to get their agricultural degree and get back to farm management for corporations. And they both came from a family farm. But their ambition was to sell themselves to corporate socialism. I couldn't believe it. You have to have a family. You know, I believe in all that rhetoric about equal pay for equal work. When I was a teenager, they didn't have minimum wage. In my first year of college, I worked my way through college. My first year in college out there in California, I had to work at less than what you call minimum wage. Equal pay for equal work, that's very just. But it's not addressing the economic system of this country. William Shirer prophesied what was going to happen to you all. He said America is going to be the first country in history to go fascist democratically. Over 50% of the homes in America are one-parent homes.
Holy shit, eh?
That's a dangerous statistic. And of course, about 48% of the rest of the homes, both parents have to work. And so you want national daycare centers. Come on down to the reservation and look at our parent child care centers, they're called. PCC on my reservation, for short. With nationally government-funded daycare centers. I'm in wonderment. Because you go over to Europe, and you can see that those are family-based economies that have stood the test of time. And nothing's perfect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about a political system. I'm talking about values, man.
You're listening to Russell Means. Welcome to the reservation. This is Independent Alternative Radio. For copies of this program, call us 1-800-444-1977 or go online, our website, alternativeradio.org.
And everyone wonders why the productivity of America is down. Why other countries are now overtaking us. Where's your jobs? You're worried about jobs. That's the syndrome they use on reservations and always have. Every 2 years on my reservation. And remember, we're the poorest. We get an election, okay? Just like y'all. I think you guys even get more frequent elections because you got municipal election, county election, state election, and national elections. We get one election every 2 years. And they come and tell us about jobs. I call it the job syndrome. They get you all focused in on getting a job. And you don't think about yesterday or tomorrow, because all you're thinking about is today. So you don't have time to walk with respect on our sacred grandmother, the Mother Earth. You don't have time because you're in the mode of survival. Welcome to the reservation. Because all you're doing now, you're not living, you're surviving. And the people without family, and I say, look at the Indians and look at the Africans, and you will see that they are more easily controlled if their family base is destroyed. And look at America. Look at the electorate. Look at what you get, man. The Demopublicans. That's all you get.
Demopublicans.
The perfect one-party system.
Demopublicans.
And you call this a democracy?
Demopublicans.
The perfect one-party system. Because the demos have the legislature. Republicans have the executive branch. So they escape responsibility. Something goes wrong, they point fingers at one another. The perfect one-party system. And y'all fall for it. Went down to Mexico City last week. My wife.
The
A country whose only viable export is agriculture. A country with homeless. We were going to take our children. But my in-laws believed everything you've ever heard about Mexico City. Don't drink the water. Because of the peso has gone downhill. Man, it's really bad in Mexico, blah, blah, this. Went down to Mexico City. You almost are asphyxiated as soon as you get outside the airport, man, because that smog is thick. You almost cut it with scissors. But it's a clean city. You don't see any homeless. And everyone is hustling, working on the streets. They're doing things. They're using their beat-up jalopies that they got down by their house or their tin shack. They're using that to be a taxi. They're doing everything they can to put money in their pockets, and food on the table, and shelter over their head. But they're working. They're on the streets, all over the streets, selling things. All over. Open market. That's what you call free market. And I was reading in the Mexican newspaper about how all the businessmen now are petitioning the government to stop these street vendors because they're taking away business. It's always perplexed me about capitalists that you're a staunch capitalist until you own a business. Then you're against free market economics. You don't want competition, man. Now you want it all yourself. It's amazing. It's amazing. The contradiction. I wanted to use Mexico City as an example of how this country tells you about the other places in the world. And you think that you're well off in a democracy. 42% of your income goes to government in taxes. In the history of the world, everyone, including the serfs of the feudal times, they rebel and had revolutions when the tenth of their monarchies demanded up to 25%. When they had to give up 25% of their hard-earned income to a government, they rebelled. You guys are setting, or your folks, are setting history, a precedent. You're the first country that is allowing yourself to be robbed blind by your own government. 17% more than anybody else in history. Everybody else rebelled. Got rid of those governments that were oppressing them. I'm talking about the serfs, man. Welcome to the reservation.
USA
But these
takes the
are
whole
facts.
world, the residential school.
Blame the Japanese. Point the finger. Point the finger at the Mexicans. Point the finger at the Japanese. Point it at the Taiwanese. At the Thais. Just start pointing fingers all over. Nobody's pointing the finger at Germany or at England, which owns more land than all the other countries combined in this country. People from England own more businesses in America than the Japanese. But nobody's pointing a finger at England. And you can get these facts in the worst newspaper in America. You just read it. It's in USA Today in the corner. Every once in a while, you get these facts, man. Welcome to the reservation. You're getting poorer and poorer. You know, the United States of America, economically speaking, is a banana republic now.
Mm-hmm.
It amazed me, Mexico City, a city of 21 million. 21 million. What's New York City have? 8 million? No homeless, man. And they're in a temperate climate. They never wear coats. Never, man. But I go to New York City often in the wintertime, in the dead of winter. And there's homeless in every neighborhood now, in every neighborhood. There used to be exclusive neighborhoods when they weren't. You know, just a few short years ago, but now the homeless are in every neighborhood, the East 50s, up on the West End, they're everywhere, Columbus Circle. And it's sad. This is also, statistically speaking, the most violent country in America. The most violent. A democracy. A democracy is the most violent. Per capita, the United States leads the world in the percentage of population in prisons. This is a democracy? You got a constitution, you got a Bill of Rights. Then why do you have the IRS? Why do you have the FDA? Or the FCC? Or anything else in the alphabet? The BIA. You know? I call it the Bureau of Idiots Anonymous. Probably more well known as the Bureau of Indian Affairs. There isn't any need for those bureaucracies. Not if you live in freedom. Not if you can. If you get laid off, you can turn your car into a taxi, or you can cook off your stove and sell your food out on the streets. You can't do that in this country unless you do it illegally, because you don't live in the proper zone. You don't have the proper license. You're not following the rules and regulations. You live in a democracy. You're supposed to vote and have representative government. Well, why then are you sitting there letting this country pass every year? Over 90% of the laws passed in these years are unrepealable, are not repealable. In other words, you're living in almost totalitarian state. over 90% of the laws passed every year in this country are unrepealable. That means the executive branch, with its rules and regulations and every one of its agencies, its bureaucracies, passing those rules, they have the force and effect of law. And if you don't believe that, then check the latest Supreme Court decisions in any year since the Rehnquist took over as CIUT, and even before that, where government is getting more and more precedence. Now you don't have the right to pray if it interferes with any agency of government. That's a fact. I know I was involved in that struggle along with every spiritual belief that is organized in this country, because they filed amicus briefs in our Supreme Court fight for religious freedom. It was about peyote. The two guys were fired because they belonged to the Native American Church in Oregon. They couldn't accept, they wouldn't give them unemployment benefits. To the always Supreme Court, they ruled against us, even though every major, including Jewish faith, filed amicus briefs with the court. So Congress passes less than 10% of the laws in this country. Those are the laws that are repealable, provided you follow the processes that are necessary to petition your government for redress. Welcome to the reservation. I'm trying to buy some land. Right now I'm involved in trying to buy some land. My first time I'm trying to buy land in my life. Everywhere I go, you don't get water rights, you don't have mineral rights, you don't have any rights. And then I find out that for the rest of my life, I have to pay rent. And then my heirs have to pay rent on that land. And it's called property taxes. Who was the idiot in your history that allowed that to happen? I don't understand how anybody could allow themselves their property to be taxed, man. That means you don't own it. You or your parents own the property, man. You miss some payments on property tax, and the government owns it. This is free market. This is democracy. That you pay rent to the government for eternity, and you don't have mineral rights. You don't have water rights. They can come in any time under eminent domain and take your property. I know because I was in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, fighting with a mixed neighborhood of blacks, Asians, and Hispanics. And we marched and marched because a local school had condemned some homes to expand a parking lot based on eminent domain. Welcome to the reservation. Now understand the Six Nations. When the French in 1597 were in a military campaign against the Six Nations, and they had the Huron Confederacy. There was a French philosopher with that campaign, a military campaign. And he began to notice that among the Hurons and among the Iroquois Confederacy, they had this way of life that allowed for individual freedom and yet nationalism at the same time. And that people were truly free in these societies. So he asked the Hurons about it, and the Huron who were working with the French were trying to explain it. He went back to France and wrote up about it, wrote it. Other French philosophers followed. More was written. The American Indian became heroes in Europe. Rousseau is the most famous, who wrote about the noble red man. And then, of course, that had to change because the American Revolution happened, the United States Constitution. The French Revolution happened. It was sweeping the world. This idea of individual liberty based on representative government. and the United States of America was founded. The Bill of Rights ensued. And in 1988, October of 1988, the United States Congress, both houses, unanimously passed a resolution thanking the Iroquois Confederacy for its major input into the development of the United States of America and its Constitution. So you see, this country doesn't have founding fathers who are not only racist, but sexist. In reality, you have founding mothers, and primitive ones at that. The clan mothers of the Six Nations Confederacy. The clan mothers of all the Indian people. They're the ones who choose the leader. They're the ones who can get divorces. They're the ones who are the strength, who prevent incest in anything, in any strata of society. They're the ones who are responsible. They're the true founders, the clan mothers of the Iroquois Confederacy, are the true founders of the United States of America. So you're founding mothers, not some idiot Eurocentric males, man, who wore powdered wigs, fluffy blouses, pedal pushers, silk stockings, and high heels. They ain't my daddy. They ain't my daddy, man. Because when I was in the first grade, I was told that that guy on the dollar bill and up there on the wall of the school auditorium was the father of my country. I looked at that guy. That ain't my daddy. It's like Columbus, you know. In our society, we have what is called a contrary clown. It's to represent the other facet, the yang of the yin, or the yin of the yang, okay? Represent the other side, flip side of the same coin in life. And that's what Columbus was. He was a contrary. It shows you the ridiculousness of Eurocentric male chauvinism, okay? He traveled west to go east. He didn't know where it come from. Nobody knows. The Spanish have claimed it. The Portuguese have claimed it. And he didn't tell anybody. The only thing we know is that all he ever spoke was Spanish, and all he ever wrote in was Spanish. Died in disgrace. He's a visionary. Y'all are celebrating this clown? Come on, man. There's half a world off course. And believe me, you can't be more off course than half of a world. The ultimate mistake. Ultimate navigational error. And you're letting your government spend $600 million of your money on this clown. Amazing. Welcome to the reservation. Sounds like the Bureau of Idiots Anonymous has permeated the United States of America. By the way, it was the BIA in 1824 that introduced sleaze into government. I kid you not, man. Research it. The first corruption in United States government history was discovered and exposed in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And now, you know, if I could not become a Republican because I was being afraid I might get elected or hired to work for the White House. I mean, every Republican administration, you get indicted, convicted, and sent to prison, man. I'd be scared to death if I was a Republican. And then those sleazos over on the Hill, man. The demo. I mean, the week doesn't go by and they're doing something perverted. You know, the Keating vibe et al. Welcome preservation. Now, one of the problems is the lack of recognition of the sacred colors. Western civilization has appropriated many things from around the world and utilized it to the advantage of themselves. I find no fault in that. Good for them. However, had they done it with respect, I wouldn't be here tonight. And neither would you all. With your families. The American Indian people, Western Hemisphere, we have contributed 60% of the world's foodstuffs. Over 70% of the medicines. We enabled Europe to enter into the Industrial Revolution through the mining of our gold and silver, which allowed the common person in Europe to have means of monetary exchange for the first time in their history. Because prior to the exploitation and exploration of the Indian people in the Western Hemisphere, the only people who were being exploited and expropriated for gold and silver were the Africans, and they weren't producing enough there for money to reach all over Europe. So the only people who had gold and silver and monetary benefits in Europe, I could go on and on and on. But if you want to find out more, read Jack Weatherford's Indian Givers. There are many, still, the most advanced features of architecture in the world are found in our cities. The modern day mining methodology developed from our techniques. On and on and on. No one's ever said thank you. We're the only color of the human race not allowed to participate in the family of nations, the red people of the Western Hemisphere. By the way, there was no country called India when Columbus wrote una gente indios, which translated means a people in with God. The English bastardized those two Spanish words, indio, indios, into Indian.
There's no such country as India in Asia.
We were being called Indians in the Western Hemisphere. Then India and the East Indies became colonized. If you don't believe it, look on the maps of 1492. India was then called Hindustan.
Exactly.
I just wanted to get that out real quickly here.
Boom, chakalaka boom.
But if there's an entire race of people not allowed to participate in the family of nations, are we civilized? Are we indeed following our spiritual directions as practiced every Sunday in your churches or synagogues or temples? Think about it. The exclusion of an entire race of people. With that exclusion, then it's impossible. It's impossible to apologize, but more importantly, it's impossible to say thank you. Because if a people aren't included, who are you going to say thank you to? If you live in a penthouse, are you going to say thank you to the farmer down in Georgia or Wyoming or Maine? Nobody says thank you anymore, man. You have to have a society that can say thank you. It's simple. Life is not a complicated proposition. There's responsibility and there's irresponsibility. Irresponsibility allows for 42% of your income to be ripped off. Don't pay it. And see how fast you land in debtor's prison. How scared are you of your government? How much fear do you have? So much fear you can't say thank you to your neighbor, to a union, to a farmer, to a bricklayer, everybody that contributes to your well-being. to my land, the Mother Earth. You can't say thank you to our grandmother, the Earth, which, by the way, Western science has now ascertained in the early 80s. They drilled a hole in Greenland, of all places, for miles into the Earth. And after studying it, the data come out from that hole, for 2 years, they have ascertained that this is a living organism in space, not just an orb rotating around the sun. Respect your mother. She will take care of you. It's a basic teaching in any responsible family. In any responsible family. Just think of a society that requires you cannot harm another human being. And it's feasible today. It's feasible today. That means the air you breathe has to be sacred. So if you have unlimited liability without government interference, then you can force the technology to be invented that will clean up the air, because they can't dirty it in the first place. They can't dirty the water. They cannot harm you. A society that cannot harm another individual. Now, if you want to harm yourself, that's a different proposition. But you got a Constitution and a Bill of Rights that is on that path. You've already got the tools.
Things stopped on me again. Instagram stopped on me again.
No, it just kills me, man. So you want to continue with the Republicans? To the war? And the result? What's the result, man? Species suicide. Species suicide. You all thought it was going to be a holocaust of nuclear weaponry. You know? That's what you thought of just a few short years ago. In 84 and 85, under the Reagan Empire of Evil accusations, the school children, your aid, man, were surveyed, and you were afraid of the nuclear holocaust. So you've got to understand, you got the tools, and you got the heritage from my people to be free. Then you don't have to fight one another. All the big boys put the money in their pocket. Get you to hate the Japanese, the Korean, and all the Arabs. What's the campaign issue? So I suggest you do something. Or what Chief Seattle said in 1854. It's going to come true. And he said, you contaminate your bed, and one night suffocate your own waste. He also said, tribe follows tribe, and nation follows nation. It's like the waves of the sea. It's the order of nature. Regret is useless. Your time of decay may be distant, but it will surely come. Or even the white man's God who walked and talked with him, as friend with friend, could not escape our common destiny. Maybe brothers after all. We shall see. Thank you.
You're just listening to Russell Means. Welcome to the reservation. This never-before broadcast program was recorded at Bowdoin College in Maine in 1992. Russell Means was a renowned activist for indigenous rights. In Oglala, Lakota, he was born on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. He was a founding member of the American Indian Movement, AIM, and its first national director. He passed away in 2012. This program is produced by Alternative Radio based in Boulder, Colorado. We're an independent nonprofit in our 39th year. We're supported solely by individuals just like you. We feature such voices as Nora Etiquette, Winona Leduc, Nick Estes, Arundhati Roy, of programs with Russell Means. To access our complete audio and book catalog, just call us 1-800-444-1977. That's 1-800-444-1977. To access our complete audio and book catalog, just go to our website, alternativeradio.org. Again, our website where we are podcasting, alternativeradio.org. For copies of today's program, Russell Means, Welcome to the Reservation, and for Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's classic book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, call us 1-800-444-1977. Again, 1-800-444-1977. Or you can order on our website, alternativeradio.org. MP3s and PDFs are free of charge. Just call us 1-800-444-1977. Joe Rishi is our general manager and editor. I'm David Barsomian. Thank you for listening.
From the roots up, CIUT 89.5
Well, it is the Monday, Thanksgiving or harvest moon time in Canada. Harvest moon, Thanksgiving, real Thanksgiving. We celebrate Thanksgiving in October in Canada. A lot of people don't know in that country called the United States of America, their Thanksgiving is very close. And some people would say it's a celebration of an edict, a proclamation from November 24th. I don't know. That's what some people say. It's an edict, a proclamation that's related to the document of discovery. That's why we will always be celebrating Thanksgiving during harvest moon time in October at this time of the year. Because this Thanksgiving is the real Thanksgiving to us, Indigenous Americans and friends of Indigenous Americans. My grandparents weren't recognized as USA because their skin complexion is too dark, as my grandfather would say. They're not white of skin. They're not white Yankee. My grandfather would say there was only one wounded knee. I don't know. I was only born in 1968. He explained it as the country's not developed. The world's not developed. Some parts are way more advanced than others. The east coast of the United States, New Amsterdam, Old York, aka now Toronto, they were advanced compared to west of the Mississippi. Some people in the Old Navy would say in the 1985 Common Era. This is 2024 this year, Common Era, the calendar that is election, United States, election 2024. Ethiopian calendar would say it's 2017. Some people remember a jump of 100 years. So some people would say it's 1917. Then some people were saying William Shakespeare was alive in the 70s. I don't know if that's the real William Shakespeare that translated the Bible into English, but what I can say is before 1975, I do recall being somewhere with my uncle when I was shorter than him, and people were translating important older texts into the modern language. And it seemed during those sessions, it came out in the sessions that they were wondering why the book of Job mentions the genealogy based on females' names and being born from a female, born from females, where the rest of the Bible talks about genealogy and what the males have done in their life. I remember a comment like, the job is Job, or Job is the job. You could only be born from a female. I think when I was young, going to school, it seems, my memory showed me, in my native tongue, not this language I am speaking right now, I used to go to school and say, hi, but it would be Annie, because that was the word from our language for hi. So Annie, from Perry, I Sean, Latin John. Some people took it as I was born out of Perry. Starting the concept that males give birth, maybe? Not possible. Not at all. No way. My mom tried to explain something. Or was it my grandmother? Either way, it was a female, American indigenous, American woman, tried to explain spirit coming back to earth. It somehow ended up being the black hole. Furthermore, a conversation of explaining worms going through the ground and tunneling and coming up somewhere else seemed to have turned to science fiction wormholes. I seem to be talking like this guy that didn't want to discuss the Seventh-day Adventists right now. And I'd say the Seventh-day Adventists, I can remember one deacon saying that the Seventh-day Adventists, they are more advanced. Scientology does not mean science, this guy was explaining. I can't remember the exact name of the show, but he's explaining Scientology. It's not science. It is sentient when they talk in that term, or thinking on biblical things, not on scientific, technical, empirical things. Therefore, I say and mention, the world is run by politicians that pay lobbyists to run a narrative that may not necessarily be true to people of the world. And those lobbyists are destroying the planet with the influence they are influencing on the world. We just heard Barsomian on his speech there. The whole world is a reservation. The whole world is in residential schools because the United States started that education system. The whole world is being educated wrongly, it seems, in English, probably in French as well, and Spanish, and Portuguese, due to the residential school system that started in the United States and infiltrated Canada and now seems to have taken over the whole world with the version of history that we have. A Newfoundlander friend had said to me, the history we have is lost. It doesn't acknowledge that over 1,000 years ago, some of my ancestors came here. It doesn't acknowledge that well over 1,000 years ago, Peruvians knew about sailing. I watched Mr. Alejandro talk about the conquistadors, and he was not educated enough to understand that while the Mayans and Aztecs may have witnessed the tall sail ships of the conquistadors, the Mayans knew about sailing and knew about boats. The comment was that they laughed at the conquistador ships because they looked like upside down houses with sails on them. Then he mentioned, this Alejandro, about the conquistadors. He's mentioned about the Inca. He didn't even mention about the Aztec or Mayan. He mentioned about how the Inca had never seen sail ships, the Spanish sail ships, but the Inca didn't see no Spanish sail ships in the mountains of Peru on the coast of Pacific. When the Spanish conquistadors got to the first Incan temples, they had rode to there on horses, going through Central America. They didn't take ships to go to Incan territory. I had never heard that before. They sailed boats on Lake Titicaca well over 1,000 years ago. So no one can claim Mayan, Aztec, Mayan, which knew and traded with the people that lived in the Caribbean, which had boats, didn't know about sailing. The whole school is experiencing residential school because of conspiracy theories that don't hold valid. Some conspiracy theories do hold valid, but there's a lot of theories out there that makes no sense. Like Sumerians living thousands of years, when we explain many times that if the Sumerians had the same calendar or similar calendar to the Mayans, the Olmec, that is probably days they were talking about. Days. Thousands of days. I've calculated myself and it makes sense that it's days. Even with Moses and Methuselah in the Bible, it's lunations. They used the lunar calendar back then. 900 lunations is about 70 to 80 years. You do the calculations yourself. The problem with modern physics is they're theoretical without doing any observational. There is no multiverse. What happened is people skipped from learning about galaxy to universe. We went from a world 100 years ago where most people, a lot of people, still think, a lot of people think the earth is flat. A lot of people think the sun goes around the earth and it's all in a self-contained system with a solid wall. And that concept that maybe a lot of Kabbalists believe, maybe the Zionists are promoting it, the earth is flat. And it's inside a dome like a snow cone. The sun is in there, the moon is in there, etc., etc., etc. If you were thinking like that, I could understand you being fearful and claiming and pushing in the media that the globe is warming. But the Earth's atmosphere has no solid boundary. Excess heat escapes the Earth. That's what happens at night when it's clear and there's no clouds. You can feel that it gets colder faster than when there's clouds that keep the heat in. Conversely, if Bill Gates tries to block out the sun, humanity will suffer because plants won't grow. There are so many cockamamie designs, theories based on global warming because people that are controlling the media probably actually think the world is going to be annihilated, and as well that the earth is in an enclosed system that heat does not escape. I even went off here on the world being a residential school because it is. The whole planet is in a residential school with international English and the psychology that it makes with the words race, war, black, white, communist, communism, violinist, pianist, etc., meaning what they mean and being used in English cryptically by the people that know and the people that control psychology to keep humanity in a psychologically bad hole. English is a poor, bad, pathetic language for explaining spirituality or history, especially when race, black, white, are used the way it is by the media. It's an election race right now. Everybody's enthusiastic, so what's a racist? It's an election race right now. Everybody's showing enthusiasm, so what is racism? Pianist, violinist, communist, communism, community, enthusiasm. But a National Socialist, National Alamighty Socialist Party, Nazis, confuse people. Stalin was a socialist. Lenin was a socialist. Marx was a socialist. Hitler was a socialist. They're all forms of socialism. United States is capitalist. They don't care. There's not enthusiasm for the capital city. It's actually revenuists. Revenuists. Financialist. Financiism. They're not showing enthusiasm for the capital city. They're not showing enthusiasm for the Washata. They're showing enthusiasm for the greenback dollar bill. Green economy would mean that combustion engine out there is running excess vegetable oil, food waste, garbage, plant material, etc., etc., etc. Instead of constantly digging deep into the earth for excess petroleum, especially what they're doing right now, the cabal of evil, trying to take gas from under Gaza, where in many languages they call petroleum benzene. And in English, the OPEC have confused humanity by calling benzene, crude, petroleum, grease, oil. Oil is from vegetable oils. Fat and lipids are from animals. Grease is from benzene, petroleum, crude. It's not oil. That's the trick OPEC used with this forced English on the world to fool people. While they disassociate American indigenous Indios from their languages in a plot for super wealthy Asians from Baratistan to use poor Asians from Baratistans by shipping them to North America to work in factories. I've worked with poor Asians side by side when I worked took up day jobs through Labor Ready that pays daily like people used to get paid around here before the National Socialists set up their system, put the social credit score on us, sent manufacturing to China didn't give us jobs while they bring poor people from other countries here, give them lesser paying jobs, and tell us we have to identify as black, African, though our oral history says we're American Indian, mixed with Vikings that came here 1,000 years ago, and according to blood quantum, where my grandparents were concerned, I would be 3/4 American Indian. Blood Indian. Blood Indian is not a tribe, it is Indian by blood. This is a shot. Nogi. On the island, they used to have a lot of bats. Fruit bats, that is. Not blood-sucking bats. Don't have the bats no more. But now I see blood-sucking moths that fly during the day. Vampire moth, as they say. And I've only seen one butterfly on the island this summer. Maybe two butterflies, one dragonfly, 2 butterflies. And I saved a dragonfly in Perry, the town, last Wednesday. It would have died if I didn't save it. Probably got hit by a flash rainstorm. Take care. Have a great day. I hope the world gets better, and I hope the New World Order doesn't take its crutches and takes its hold on the earth and keep it. Break the chains of the New World Order that wants to destabilize the whole world and break up all families to turn everybody into sex workers for the super wealthy.